Perfect. So welcome everyone to the Dulye Leadership Experience program, Transforming Stress, an interactive workshop for improving your well-being and mental fitness with Julie Haagenson. And please note that this program is being recorded and will be available for subsequent viewing on the DLE YouTube channel. And for now, just please keep your microphones on mute so we don't get any feedback, all right? Thank you so much for joining. Really happy to be here. My name is Khaled Rocha, and I am a Vice President of Investments, Private Client Advisor at JP Morgan in Boston, Wealth Management. And I'm a member of the DLE. I will be your moderator today, and I'm lucky to be the moderator today, so I really appreciate it. Along with my fellow DLE member, Kaylee Carmel, she's also a co-moderator, so thank you, Kaylee, for being here. Kaylee is a cash management portfolio manager at Adams Community Bank based in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. As you know, we're all in the States, so to maximize everybody's learning experience, we have some DLE core ground rules here, all right? So we like sessions to be more interactive, and we at the very end, we have reserved time for question and answer. We use the chat box a lot during this session for comments, for questions that are related to this topic. We will keep monitoring the chat for your questions and comments, and we'll incorporate them. So please don't be shy. The point of it is to learn and to hear from you. In addition to learning, we use this program to broaden your network. That's the point of networking. So in the spirit of making connections, please type in the chat box your name, your title, who you work for, and where you are currently located. So for me, for example, Khaled Rocha, JP Morgan, Wealth Management in Boston. So I would love to see where you're all from. I'll do mine right now too. Thank you, Kaylee. I almost called you Caramel because that's like your last name first for some reason. Sorry. Thank you, Tiffany. Oh my goodness, Berkshire's. Pittsfield. Kevin, thank you so much. Lee, thank you so much. Berkshire's, love it. Pittsfield, great. Sarasota, Florida. Linda, thank you. It's going super quick. No, I'm really New York. Elena, thank you so much. So many new faces. Absolutely, Kaylee. We love it. So, and on that same thing, thank you for typing it in. It's great to see the diversity of our participants, and especially our newcomers to the DLE. So, all right. So moving on. Try your best to minimize distractions, please, and stay focused. This is a great program, and the more distractions we have, the more burnout we will feel. So that will not be good. So have a pen and paper ready. I've got mine ready to take notes. So, and then you can, also actively participate. So, and at the very end, please take a few minutes to provide your feedback to the workshop evaluation that you will receive after this program. In exchange for your response, you will receive a 5-step program from Julie as a tool, for that will help you, plus a complimentary consultation with Julie. I just get the line there. So thank you, Julie, for being so generous and giving us that option. So again, just answer that feedback for us. We love to learn, hear from you, so we can grow our programming according to our members. Okie doke. So let's welcome Julie. Julie's a fantastic resource. Julie has over 2 decades of experience as a counselor, facilitator, educator, consultant, and coach. I think I got all of them, but if I didn't, please let me know. So she is the founder of New Pathways Coaching and Consulting, and she empowers leaders with tools and strategies to increase well-being and improve performance. She's a certified professional coach and energy leadership master practitioner through the Institute of Professional Excellence in Coaching, IPEC for short, a program accredited by the International Coaching Federation. She incorporates her training as a mental fitness coach with the Positive Intelligence Program and her training at the Yale Center of Emotional Intelligence into her consultancy with organizations across the country. Her work is both empathetic and science-based, informed by years of research in cognitive behavioral psychology, education, and neuroscience. So without further ado, let's welcome Julie. Julie, we are super excited for today's presentation. So please take it away.
Thanks, Khaled. I just want to start by showing some appreciation for Khaled and for Kaylee and Nicole and Linda from the Dulye Leadership Experience. You can show them a little appreciation on screen or drop some emoji reactions in the chat box if you're familiar with Zoom. So welcome, everyone. I see some familiar faces out there, some smiling faces, some tired faces. And I always like to start by getting to know people a little bit. So I'm curious about how everyone's coming into our workshop today. So if you could summarize your thoughts, emotions, and physiology in one word, just one word, what would that word be? Go ahead and drop that answer in the chat box and let's see what we come up with. Stretched, overwhelmed, frustrated, fragmented, stress, snack time, drained, tired, curious, grateful, inspired. Oh, great. Lots of great responses out there. I see some more overwhelmed. All right, let me ask you another question, and this one's going to be a poll question. This one should pop up on your screen. And the question is, how much stress have you experienced in the past year? A lot, a moderate amount, relatively little, or almost no stress at all? And the second question is, how much of an effect has stress had on your health? A lot, some, hardly any, or none? Go ahead and choose both answers there in your poll and submit them. And in just a moment, we will see the results. Give people a few moments for that to come up. All right, so the poll results are in. A lot of stress, 77%. And as far as the effect that it's had, a lot of stress and some effect on people's health. Thanks for taking the time to fill out that poll. So what if I told you that by changing the way that you think about stress, you could change its physical effects on you? If you're like me, you'd be skeptical. During the pandemic, like a lot of people, I found myself sliding down the slippery slope of burnout. I was highly stressed and it was taking a toll on my health. I was waking up in the middle of the night with racing thoughts and a racing heart. And I started to research everything I could get my hands on about getting rid of stress. I thought that if I could eliminate stressors and just have less stress, it would improve my health and well-being. So in the process, I came across research that completely changed the way that I think about stress and well-being. In one study, researchers asked over 30,000 participants the same two questions you just answered in our poll, and the results were fascinating. The key difference between people who are stressed out with negative health outcomes, including death, and people who are stressed with much better health outcomes was not just how much stress they experienced, but whether or not an individual believed that stress was harmful to your health. People's beliefs or mindsets about stress were a key factor in their health outcomes. So that's why I'm here today to talk about how to transform stress and build mental fitness and well-being by rethinking it. So to start, let's start out by defining stress. One of my favorite definitions comes from Hank Green from the Crash Course video series. He defines stress as the process by which we perceive and respond to certain events or stressors. What I love about this definition is it focuses on two important things: our response, which I'll call the physiological process we have in response to a stress or a threat, and the perception, which is about our thought process. And it has to do in part with our appraisal of our situation. When we can understand and recognize our own stress response, we can transform it. And we can learn tools to take control of the thoughts and feelings and actions we feel when we're experiencing stress. Most of us experience stress when the demands of our lives exceed our capacity to meet those demands. And so that's where mental fitness comes in. Mental fitness is taking action to increase our capacity to manage stress so that we can maintain our well-being. We know that if we want to increase our physical fitness, we need to exercise regularly. And the same thing is true of mental fitness. So just like we can lift weights to build our muscles, there's daily practices we can use to train our brains to become better equipped to manage stress. So to start off, we need to understand a little bit about the role our brain plays in stress. So as you probably know, our stress response is our body's alert system. And the evolutionary goal is to help boost the body and mind into enhanced functioning so we can help meet the demands of our lives. And it happens in a cycle. When our brains perceive a threat, the body goes from a resting state to an activated state by triggering the autonomic nervous system. This is the physiological part of that definition I just gave. And the nervous system has two parts. You can think about the analogy of a car to describe them. The sympathetic nervous system is like a gas pedal in the car. It pumps out hormones like adrenaline and cortisol to fuel the brain and body by increasing heart rate and circulation, activating your muscles, making your breathing shallow, giving your body energy to move into action. And it also activates the fight or flight response designed to help us defend or avoid or escape danger. If you think about it in terms of early humans, we were hardwired that way because our survival depended on it. When the brain and body perceive that the threat has passed, the parasympathetic nervous kicked in, and it acts like a brake, the brake pedal in the car. It slows your heart rate down, slows your breathing to the normal function, and it relaxes your body, returning to the rest and recover state. And it completes the cycle. But today, we aren't typically running from saber-toothed tigers like early humans were, and our stressors are different. And they don't always require a full body response as they did way back when. So the things that stress most people out, like work and relationship and finances, are more internal experiences and our thought processes or our appraisals of the situations. But the thing is that our bodies and brains don't know the difference, and they launch a full body response, and we get stuck in this cycle. I want to share a quick way to visualize this response. Dr. Dan Siegel uses a model of the hand to understand what happens in the brain when we perceive a threat. He uses it to describe 3 regions of the brain. So if you make a fist right now and imagine this is inside your head as your brain, the thumb should be inside. So our wrist is where the brainstem would be in our brain, and that's our survival brain. It's our automatic unconscious functions like our heartbeat, our breathing, our circulation, and where our fight or flight response happens. If you open your palm, the inner section is our feeling brain, the limbic system. It governs our emotions, our motivation, and our connections to our caregivers, and it's nonverbal. If you close your fingers again, this exterior part where our fingers cover is our cortex. It's where our frontal lobe of our brain is, right here in our forehead. And that's our thinking brain. It's our analyzing, our problem solving, and our rational decisions happen here. Our well-being depends on all of these parts working together. It's called neural integration. And this integration is what helps you manage your impulses and choose the appropriate response to a stressor. So here's the important part. when the demand outweighs our capacity to manage our stressors, he calls it a flipped lid. Because this rational decision-making part of our brain goes offline, and our bodies and brains default to the survival and feeling brain, this interior part, and our rest. And we can't appraise the present situation accurately using this rational part of our brains. So instead, we go into unconscious behaviors. We go on default and automatic stress responses, and it keeps us stuck in this cycle. So in order to bring our brain back into an integrated state so that we can maintain well-being, we have to train our brains. So just like an athlete would train to increase physical fitness, we can increase our well-being by using tools to increase our mental fitness. We can do it by cultivating awareness, sending our body signals that we're not in danger so we can complete this stress cycle, and rethinking our mindsets around stress so we can use our stress as a tool to take conscious action. In a moment, we're going to go through my 5-step pathway with tools on how to do this. But first, I want you to take a minute to think about a situation that's currently causing you stress. It could be in your personal or professional life, and go ahead and jot it down in your notebook. And while you do that, I'm going to start walking you through the steps. So the 5-step pathway is a framework that you can use to rethink and transform stress. And it incorporates ideas from experts in the field that I've come across in my work, and I've compiled them into a simple methodology. Steps 1 and 2 are about raising your awareness about stress. And steps 3 through 5, we start to transform our response and perception and move into action. So step 1 is noticing. It starts with noticing what happens to us when we're under stress. So take a minute right now and tune into your body. Notice any physical sensations and notice where you're carrying any stress that you have right now. Do you have a clenched jaw, a knot in your neck or in your shoulders? Do you get butterflies in your stomach or cold hands? And next, scan your thoughts. Notice the speed at which your thoughts are moving and notice the quality of your thoughts. What are they doing? When we're under stress, our minds go into autopilot, and a lot of times it's negative because it's hardwired. And if you remember, early humans were constantly scanning the horizon for threats. And so unconsciously, we move into this stress cycle, and it happens fast. Our automatic thoughts are convincing, and we often accept them as fact. But most of them are untrue and unhelpful. And our stress is fueled by this inaccurate thought process. So we're going to do a little experiment right now. It starts with holding a hand up to the camera. And I'm going to share with you 5 ways that our minds can get away from us when we're in an automatic thinking, negative thinking pattern. And as I name them, I want you to put a finger up for each time you hear a thought pattern that you've experienced. The first one is generalizing. These are always and nevers. So thoughts like, this always happens to me. They never listen to me. Or because this happened before, it will probably happen again. The second is catastrophizing. Worst case scenarios and what ifs. This is going to be terrible. Or what if it's a complete failure? Number 3 is assumptions, like mind reading or assuming somebody else's intentions. They must think that I'm not qualified, or they're doing this because they don't like me. Or fortune telling, if I do this, then they're just going to ... Number 4 is shoulds. I should be feeling, thinking, or doing ... And the 5th is judging. Judging yourself, judging circumstances, judging others. And this can include your mindset about stress itself, whether you judge it as good or bad or harmful. All right, so thanks everybody. You can go ahead and put your hands down. See lots of fingers out there, and that's why we start with the tune in tool. We scan the body and our thoughts, and the goal is to raise those automatic thought patterns into our conscious awareness. So take a moment right now to think about that stressful situation that you jotted down, and just jot down which of these thinking patterns pop up for you. In step 2, we name 4 things. We name what might have caused our reaction. We name any thoughts that are on repeat. I call this the red flag thoughts tool. These are the ones that flip our lids, or as I say, they send us over the falls. And we can recognize them because they're recurring. And we also name the precise emotions that we're experiencing, and the more accurately we can express it, the better. So rather than I'm so stressed, you might say I'm exasperated or I'm discouraged. A recent study at UCLA found that just naming emotions disrupts the activity in the feeling part of our brain and activates our cortex, our thinking part of our brain. And last, we name the behaviors and actions that we're taking when we're in default mode. How do we show up when we're stressed? And there's a number of common responses. A great way to explain them comes from Stanford lecturer Shirzad Chamine. He calls it being hijacked. In his book, Positive Intelligence, he breaks them down into 9 basic categories shown here on the slide. The ways that people self-sabotage when they're hijacked from their stress response, and he calls them saboteurs. You might have the controller saboteur that tries to take control over situations or other people, the pleaser who tries to fix things or other people, or keep everyone else happy when they're under stress. Or maybe you have the hyperachiever that works harder and harder until they feel burned out. So if you would, in the chat box right now, take a moment and type the saboteur that you identify with from this list. I am a hyperachiever pleaser. I see some hyperachievers in there. Thanks for typing those in. Some pleasers, hyper rational, says Lauren, pleaser. Yeah. So with steps 1 and 2, we tune in using the tune in tool to notice our physical reactions and our automatic thought patterns. We name the stressor that sets us off, the precise emotions we experience. We use the red flag tool to measure our specific, repetitive, unhelpful thoughts, and found some common ways we show up. Do everything, or thanks, Lee. Found some common ways that we show up when we're hijacked by them. And step 3, we start to use some tools to build our mental fitness. And this involves pausing and resetting so we can use the data that we gathered in the first 3 steps. This is a really important step, and it's a step that's often overlooked. So it's important to bring our brain back into an integrative state before we move into action so that we can choose to respond consciously in the present moment. And the first and most powerful tool that we have is our breath. If you're anything like me, when you hear this, you might be a little skeptical. So let me share a little bit about why. Our breath sends a signal directly to our nervous system. It interrupts negative thoughts, and it gives our body the signal that it can move to a more balanced state. It's so effective that Navy SEALs use this first tool, the box breath. And for box breath, you inhale for 4 counts, you hold for 4 counts, you exhale for 4 counts, and hold for 4 counts. The deep breathing brings the oxygen into the lungs and stimulates the release of endorphins that reduce the stress hormone cortisol in our bodies. And the holding increases CO2 in the bloodstream, and that slows our rapid heartbeat. So together, they activate the brakes of the body's stress response, and they allow us to hack this cycle. So we're going to give it a try right now. You can go ahead and start the video. And just follow the prompts on the screen. All right. Great. So the goal at this stage is to shift our body out of the hijack state and into a more neutral state. So this tool, the box breath, is really great in the moment. It's great if you're up in the middle of the night with racing thoughts, but mental fitness also requires practice and repetition. So the second reset tool that I'll teach you tonight is called a PQ rep. It comes from the Positive Intelligence program. It's a 10-second hyper focus on one of your 5 senses. So for anyone who struggles the time to find time for mindfulness, like yoga or meditation, PQ reps are quick and they're a foundational practice you can do anytime or anywhere. So if you want to try right now, close your eyes or gaze downward and focus on your sense of hearing. Listen to all of the sounds that were out of your awareness until this moment. Notice the furthest away sound, the sound of my voice, the closest voice sound that you can hear. It might even be your own breath. And if you notice thoughts creep in, just direct your attention back to the sensation of hearing. And now open your eyes. Doing this for just 10 seconds shifts you back into the rational thinking part of your brain and centers you in the present moment. The goal with any habit like this is consistency. You can use this PQ rep every time you have a red flag thought. And better yet, you can develop a practice that incorporates these reset tools into your day to train your brain to be more likely to respond from a centered place. So now step 4 is about gaining clarity, and it begins the process of transforming our thoughts. So think back to the negative mind talk that I mentioned early. PQ stands for your positive intelligence quotient, Jen. Thanks for that question. Step 4 is about gaining clarity and beginning the process of transforming your thoughts. So when we think about the negative mind talk we were talking about earlier, we talked about how they're untrue and unhelpful because they're driven by our unconscious mind. And they don't usually lead us to the outcomes that we want. So let me give you an example. Let's say you're stressed out over a deadline. Raise a hand if anybody has ever had this experience. So the outcome that you want is the recognition of reaching the finish line on time, but you're anxious that you won't meet the deadline. So when you think about it, you notice your chest starts to tighten up and your brain starts to catastrophize. And you hear some of your red flag thoughts. This is too much. I can't handle it. Why bother trying? And then you go into avoider mode. You procrastinate and you start staying away from the people who you're accountable to, which makes you feel more anxious and makes them question your ability and wonder if you're up to the task. So you continue to avoid an attempt to calm the anxiety and you miss the deadline, confirming the belief that you can't handle it. So often the ways that we show up under pressure sabotage us, and they make the problem worse rather than relieving it. So in step 4, we start by getting curious. What's causing your stress, and is the way you're showing up getting you the outcome that you want? The next is to fact check. Is it actually true that you can't handle it and that it's too much? If it is, then what resources do you need? But if it's not, where does that story come from? It usually comes from past experience. Last, we address the need by going back to the emotion. This is the most important part. Our emotions are signposts that tell us what we need. What do you actually need when you're anxious? For me, it's support. Take a minute to write down what you need when you're stressed. Reflection gives you clarity about how to address the core issue causing your stress. And step 5 is where the transformation begins. When we're able to recognize the patterns we fall into when we're under stress, when we pause and look at the situation with clarity, we can look at what mindset shifts we can make to get the outcomes we want. And we can reframe that story that we're telling ourselves. So for instance, in the deadline example, the outcome I actually want is completion and recognition. So instead of listening to my autopilot thoughts that say avoid and procrastinate, I can reframe my mindset to say that when I'm anxious, what I actually need is support. This thought empowers me with the freedom to choose to reach out and get the reassurance or the resources that I need to complete the project on time. So the goal of these 5 steps isn't to eliminate negative thoughts. We all have them. But each time we recognize them and pause and reframe them, it creates a new pathway in our brains. Even just visualizing the outcome that you want can alter your biochemistry and ultimately how your body responds. Study after study that I read tells us that shifting your mindset can influence not only your performance, but it can rewire your brain's neural circuitry to support your physical health and well-being. One of the best definitions of leadership that I've heard is that leadership is taking responsibility for what matters to us most. And in order to do that, we need to know what matters to us most. And we do that with our values. Our values act like a compass to help us navigate each moment and each decision and help us decide how to behave and what kind of person we want to be. And we feel stress when we're not living in alignment with our values. According to Stanford professor Kelly McGonigal, writing about your values is one of the most effective psychological interventions ever studied. In her book, The Upside of Stress, she writes that people who write about their values once for 10 minutes show benefits months or even years later. Values help us take conscious action. So to wrap up, take one moment to consider that situation that's been giving you stress and consider what's most important to you. What's one value you can use to help guide you into purposeful action? And I encourage you, don't just think about it, write it down, put it on a sticky note, put it on your laptop, because surrounding our roles as leaders are human beings, and human beings connect through shared values. When we lead with our values, it creates resonance and we can lead together with purpose. So when we raise our self-awareness of how we show up when we're stressed, we increase our mental fitness, we can choose our mindsets that allow us to transform stress and increase our well-being. So this information will be available in a bonus resource at the end of the workshop. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand it back to Khaled for some questions from our audience.
Julie, wow, that was absolutely fantastic. I was my hand hurts. Too many notes, and I really do. I love the framework, the 5 step. I mean, just doing it, I felt better. Starting this program today, I was feeling, burdened, stretched. Then I think I put a sputtering, like I was just kind of running on fumes.
Yep.
Well, I feel a lot better already just by doing the box breathing and the PQ rep. I got that down too. I never done that before. So I really appreciate that. I'm sure we got many people that have questions. We have some questions in advance here that I kind of want to start with. We have about 25 minutes or so, a little under, to pepper you with questions, Judy. So here we go. I'm
Good.
sure this
Sounds
topic
good.
is so like, I mean, the biggest challenge that I think people have, and this is a question we got a lot before this workshop started, is like, how do you make time for like mental health? And because I know we have a lot of like work and life and pushing you in different stuff. So, and like sometimes we get into situations where it's stressful to even find time to get mental health. So, like, do you have any tips around that?
Absolutely. Thanks, Khaled. That's the $1 million question, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there are 3 things. Make it simple, make it frequent, and make it enjoyable. When we think about starting a new goal, we often set the bar really high. We set big, ambitious goals, especially as high achievers, right? Go big or go home. And that works initially, but the motivation to sustain them dwindles. Just
Mm.
think about New Year's resolutions. So the key to achieving big is starting small with micro habits, 5 minutes or less. So a 30-second PQ rep to start your day, or a 5-minute walk to start an exercise habit. So these simple, small micro habits they're like components that build into bigger goals. It feels really silly, but it's actually really effective. And the key to starting a new habit is not how long we do it, but how often. When you repeat a habit, the structure of your brain creates a pathway to be more efficient. And the more that you repeat it, you tighten those neural connections. So when you're getting started on building a mental fitness routine, frequency builds momentum. So the most effective way is we're all so busy, is habit stacking. So if you think about all of the habits that you have in a day, you get out of bed, you brush your teeth, you drink your coffee. Habit stacking is when you tack a new habit onto something that you already do. So it might be taking one deep breath after you turn on the light in the morning, or pausing when you take your first sip of coffee in the morning to focus on that sense, on the sensation of the warmth on your hand. Writing one sentence in your journal before you go to bed. And then these tiny stacks of habits create a system. And when we have a system in place, if we fall off track, we can get back to it by starting with the first step. And then the last part is making it fun, is that our brains are hardwired for rewards. So shape your wellness routine around your interests. If you love to ride your bike. If you don't love to do yoga or meditate, don't do it, right? Watch for those shoulds. If I want to feel less stressed, for me, it's to go by the water. So I start my system with a 5-minute walk by the lake instead of going to yoga or taking a class at the gym. So I think the biggest component is that feeling of success, grabbing a little micro habit, doing it frequently, and keeping that commitment to yourself and feeling successful gives feedback to the brain. And that behavior reinforces the behavior that you want and helps you maintain your motivation.
I love that. No, and that's a very interesting way. Like habit stacking it's amazing because it is about kind of starting out your mental gym journey, fitness journey to increase the capacity. Because you're right, the mantra in the capacity equals stress, and that activates the fight or flight mode and everything. So that is fantastic, and thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you
Um,
don't want to overwhelm your nervous system and send yourself into the stress response with the
Yeah,
goal.
no, exactly. And having these shoots, like, oh, I should be doing yoga to distress myself. But if it's stressful, then you're
Yes.
right. It's not really helpful. But that kind of leads me to the next question that we have here. And I know we had a question that was sent to me directly in the chat here by Anthony. It's like, when you have multiple deadlines or obligations, or you're constantly needed at work, or at home, like, how are you supposed to manage all those stressful thoughts at once? Like, how do you prioritize yourself with that? Yeah.
It's a good question, Anthony. There's two ways that come to mind. The first is visualize the outcome that you want and attach it to a value. So if we use the example in the last question of work-life balance, one of my core values is family. And when I'm out of alignment with that value, I feel it. I start to feel stressed out. When I walk for even 5 minutes by the lake, I start my day feeling calm and able to be fully present when I show up at work. Then I'm more effective when I get there. And then I feel confident when I need to set a boundary and leave on time to spend time with my kids when they get home.
Mhm.
So having quality time with my kids honors my value of family, and then I feel like a good mom. So attaching that outcome to a value is what helps me prioritize it. So because I value my family, I'll take 5 minutes to walk by the lake. I'll set a boundary to leave on time. And then I'll live that value by listening to my teenager talk about something that's important to him, usually video games or music. But it's amazing the value of that 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be a long time. 10 minutes of presence with your family can really make all the difference than lots of time without presence.
That is fantastic. And it's funny because the attaching your outcome to your value, that's the first step in prioritizing. So thank you, Julie. I'm gonna go to Kaylee. I know there's been many questions being asked in the chat that I have not been able to keep track of. And luckily I got Kaylee helping me out. So what do you
Great.
got?
Yeah, I got a couple in the chat, and please, if you have any questions for Julie, put them in there so that we can get them answered. But Josh was wondering, when you went over the reframe step in the path, what if you don't necessarily know how to reframe? Like, can you give some, like, elaborate a little more on how you can work through that reframe step?
Sure. I mean, the easiest reframe is to really fact check, to look at the situation, and you have to do this after you've kind of reset and brought yourself into a clear place. You can ask yourself, what would be a more empowering way to think about this? Or what would be a thought that is going to get me closer to the outcome that I want? So I think it starts with thinking about what is the outcome that I actually want out of this situation, and reframing it that way. Is the way that I'm showing up helping me get closer to that goal that I want or not? And what would I have to tell myself? What would someone who is really motivated to get to that outcome, what would they do? Sometimes you can reframe by thinking, what would I say to a friend who was in the same predicament as I was right now? Because oftentimes we talk to ourselves in a way that we would never talk to somebody else. And that's a way to kind of gauge what's happening with your mind talk. Are you saying things to yourself that you would never say to somebody else? So that's one way to do it, is to kind of step out of yourself and say, what would I say to my best friend or to my partner if they were going through this? And you can work it from there to reframe. Hopefully that helps.
Great, thank you. And then one other one that popped up in the chat, Kevin was wondering, when you had us do that PQ exercise where we were listening to all the sounds around us, do you always choose audio in general, or did you choose that because this is like an audio-based workshop?
That's a great question. You can use any of the 5 senses to do those little mini sensory integrations. And the point of it is really just to bring you back into this front part of your brain, because this is where the rational decision making brings. So you can do it with touch. You can do it by rubbing 2 fingers together. The point of it is really to choose something that works for you in the moment. It depends on what your situation is and where you are. But you can use any of those 5 senses. It's kind of the opposite of what we think about. We think about meditation as like shutting off all of the exterior stimuli, but really this approach with these little mini sensory integrations brings you into one of those senses, where you just really pay attention to everything that you tune out during the day. So whatever works for you as far as creating that brief moment of presence that brings you back into the present moment.
That is fantastic. Haley, do you have any more questions in the chat that you want to ask?
There's one more. So Tiffany is asking, how long should this 5-step process take? Is it something you work through immediately when you're feeling stressed?
That's a great question. It depends. Sometimes you can do it really quickly. Sometimes it takes forever. When I'm using this with my son, when I'm using it as a parent, sometimes it'll take me all day just to get the reset mode, just to get myself reset and able to show up the way I want to with my kids. As a parent, when my lid is flipped, that's when you hear all of your parents' words coming out of your mouth. That's when you know you're on autopilot. The trick is, if you think about that image of the stress cycle, the quicker you can recognize that you're triggered, the quicker that you can recognize that you are in that stress response, the better. So the 5-step process, as far as recognizing when you're in a stressful moment, the idea is to decrease the amount of time that it takes to bring that into your awareness. That being said, some of these mental fitness tools you can practice even when you're not stressed. So the point is to incorporate it into your daily functioning and into your daily habits, so that you help shorten that amount of time. What happens is the more that you practice, you create a neural pathway that makes it more likely for you to be successful the next time. I like to think about it like a sledding hill. That first time, that first path that gets carved is deep. And you can, the first time you try to make another path, you're going to get sucked into that old toboggan trail. But the more and more that you practice that mental fitness practice, that neural pathway in your brain becomes more and more deeply grooved, and it will help support that slowing down of that process.
No, and I like you keep saying and reinforcing that this is a process and it's not a night and day thing. You have to work out like you're going to the gym. So I really do appreciate that, Julie. We have I do want to kind of move on a little bit and come back to questions if we have a little time. But I know that you wanted us to go through an exercise in writing, reflective writing, that I think will be good for the audience to have. That may come up with more questions. So if you want to go to the next slide, if you don't mind, please. Thank you. And I'll let you take it away, Julie, with this and how we should be thinking about this.
Sure. This is the exercise that you can use after we get off our call today. This is just a 5-minute reflective writing exercise. And it takes you through that step, that reflection step of the pathway, and helps you really get clear on what is the issue, how am I showing up, is it getting me the outcome that I want? And it focuses on getting to that need, because when we can get down to addressing that core need, that's where the real change begins. Because when we address the fear or the anxiety or the frustration or whatever that emotion is, and we take care of that, we're able to shift into that reframing process a lot easier. So this is going to be included in that free resource that you get, the bonus resource that you get after you fill out the survey at the end of our time today, along with the 5 steps and some other tools that you can use, and a link to schedule your consult with me.
Amazing. No, Julie, that is so generous of you. We really do appreciate that you're providing that for us here at the DLE. And I wanted the audience to see this beforehand, because as you were reading these questions, I was looking at my notes on the 5 steps. Like, these questions are directly related to these 5 steps.
Exactly.
The noticing what is causing me stress. Like, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I see a question that I'd love to address. I see
Please.
Kevin has written, do you think that there are any positives around stress in modern times, or do you think that it's a hindrance? This gets back to the beginning of what we talked about when I talked about that study that looked at the way people think about stress. So our mindset about stress, if we can shift that mindset and reframe that mindset to something that's positive, there's actually research that shows how positive that is on our health and our well-being outcomes, blood pressure, performance, all kinds of things. So thinking about your body's stress response as an asset, even getting ready for our presentation this evening, I could feel the butterflies in my stomach. I could feel the tightness in my chest. And I told myself, this is energizing me. It's giving me the energy to show up and share this information with my community, right? As opposed to saying, oh God, I'm so stressed out, I'm gonna make a mistake. So that's a great question, Kevin. It really speaks to that idea of shifting our mindset about stress and how it can be a tool to really serve us.
I love that answer, Julie, because as you were thinking of saying that, I was thinking about my work, and sometimes before client meetings, I'd go to the mirror and look at myself, and I'd be like, no, you're not nervous, you're excited. It's okay.
Exactly.
Like, it's just the reframing things. And it takes practice for sure. I've been meditating for years, and I'm not the best at it, or I mean, there's nothing to win there except for calm. So it's a
Yeah,
win-win
yeah,
win-win.
it's a subtle shift, right? But your
Mhm.
nervous system doesn't know the difference. Your
Yeah,
nervous
absolutely.
system is going to react in the same way. So anything that you can tell yourself to reframe that process and
Mm,
really hack that cycle so you
yeah,
can convince your body that you are okay and that this is a good thing that's happening to you.
that's fair. That's fair. Kaylee, are there any more questions in the chat?
Yeah, another one came through from Sarah. Do you think that the human body hasn't evolved yet to change our stress responses for modern times, and why or why not?
It absolutely has. You know, our fight or flight response is kind of along a spectrum. So our fight or flight response, this is when when you're at the peak of your fight or flight response. This is when you're in an emergency situation. When there's a car accident, this is where you hear people like getting super strength and lifting cars off of their children. But it's not the only response that we have. There's the challenge response, which kind of activates us and allows us to move into motion. There's the tend or befriend response, because there's other biological processes that happen in our stress response. There's the release of oxytocin that actually is like our empathy receptor. So that's what moves us to help in times of stress and struggle. So absolutely, that's a great point, Sarah. There are lots of responses. And part of this process is helping your body to shift into a more favorable response.
Thank you for that, Julie. Really, because it's true. I mean, it's true. That's a great question with the fight or flight. Like, are we still cave people? I don't think so. But still, like, we kind of go back to the instincts to a certain point, to a certain degree.
And it
So,
depends on your history, it depends on your experience, it depends on your biology and your genes and what you've experienced in your experience, if you've experienced trauma. So these kind of all determine what your stress response is and
mhm.
how strongly it gets activated.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. And something I kind of want to draw some focus on is the fact that these are steps. The 5 steps are steps. Just take it step by step. Sometimes what I do, I fail on just realizing that these are just steps that I have to do, and I want to do it all at once, and that's even stressful to me. So it makes no sense.
Right? That's
Mm.
the hyperachiever in you probably there, Khaled.
Maybe, maybe,
Now,
maybe not,
you
or
know,
just the tense one, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, most of my clients spend a lot of time just in the noticing phase. It's one of the most important steps is just spending a lot of time in that noticing phase and noticing your thoughts. And just, being able to kind of step back and watch them rather than get on the train ride.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is a process and it's a process that repeats over and over again. And you can really spend a lot of time in each step
Mhm.
to really hone those skills.
I love that. I love that. I believe we have one more question, Kaylee. Did we?
Yeah, in this reflective writing practice, is it possible that the what is the outcome I want question is the same as what do I really need when I feel this way? Or should they be different?
Sure, that's a great question. It can be. The outcome could be to get your need met 100%.
Yeah, I think it just be more, once you start thinking about it, is it more like you have to be more self-aware of it or what you're looking for?
Absolutely, absolutely. Thinking about that outcome is, again, I'll use a parenting example for this one. When you're making a decision and your outcome that you want is this, great relationship with your child, for instance, it can help you determine in the moment how you respond or behave to them, right? So instead of criticizing or yelling, you can say, wait, the outcome that I actually want is this great relationship. And this applies to the workplace as well, right? What
Mm-hmm.
I want is recognition and to move up in the company. And is this decision that I'm making, is this action that I'm going to take going to move me closer to that or further away from that? And
Mm-hmm.
so that's where the need might be a little bit different, right? You might need to say, you know what, I need to take a step back and go take care of how I'm feeling right now because I'm frustrated at in my workplace.
Mhm.
And then I can come back and take purposeful action towards that outcome that I want once I've addressed that need.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm so happy this is being recorded because I'm gonna reference this in the DLE channel on YouTube later because it's been a great information and great frameworks to keep going. And I know I got a lot out of it. So I think we have time to fit in one more question. Does anybody have a question? Or Kaylee, did you get any more in the chat?
There's no more in the chat right now. But if
Okay.
someone wants to unmute and ask if they have one last one in their head.
In the meantime, I'll just remind everybody that you're going to get a takeaway after this. If you respond to our survey, please respond to it. We love your feedback. And just remember that this will be available also on the YouTube channel. And welcome to the DLE. So, Jen, I see that you have to end, so I appreciate that. So any last questions? Going once? Twice? Okay, I think we're sold. So, Julie, again, thank you so much. This was a fantastic framework to get us started in our mental fitness journey and going to the gym in our head.